on planet Mars, we have Patricio Vargas. He's a developer advocate at OneSignal. And here's what I know about him. Pato has participated in several hackathons and even won 2 of them. He loves mentoring people in technology, writing articles, contributing to open source, speaking at conferences, tech talks just like ours, and advocating technologies that he loves. And here's a fun fact I just heard before we met. Pato in Spanish means duck. So let's hear Web for All, the power of progressive web apps.
So everyone is awake? Awesome. So I like to make my talks really dynamic. So I might ask you something throughout my talk. I might point at you and be like, hey, can you tell me something about this? But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to be talking about progressive web applications. And the name of my talk is obviously that one right there, Web for All, the power of progressive web apps. I want to thank OneSignal. OneSignal is my employer. They gave me time, to come all the way to Lithuania and give the talk. I'm actually Mexican, but I live in New York City, and I'm right here, right? Which is awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. So if you're interested in open source, feel free to join our community. We are open source tool. We have open source projects for Angular, React, Vue, Android, iOS. I mean, you name it. We have like nine open source projects, and they are being used by over 1.3 million people. And they help deliver around 10 billion messages a day. So that's a lot. Thank you so much, of course, Build Stuff. Thank you so much for making this event happen. It's awesome to be here. And what up? Doing good? So who am I? Well, they represented me. I'm Patricio Vargas. I go by Pato. If you don't like me, call me Patricio. If you like me, call me Pato. I'm a Google developer expert on Angular and web technologies. I actually don't like the title expert. I think it's just kind of weird. I think people people should just call me developer if they want. I'm also a Auth0 ambassador, Postman Supernova, Trillium champion, AWS community builder, Google Woman Tech Maker, and media developer expert at Cloudinary. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, here's my handle. So let's talk about PWAs. Anyone knows what a PWA is? Nobody? Raise your hand. Somebody knows? My friend, do you know what a PWA is? There you go. Thank you so much. I'm done. I'm kidding. No, what is a PWA? A PWA stands for Progressive Web Applications, right? That's the short terminology. And PWAs are essentially applications that have the ability to be installed in your device. The way I see PWAs is regular web applications with superpowers. So who uses PWAs? Tinder. If you ever see me on Tinder, make sure that you swipe right. Give me that super like. And Microsoft uses PWAs, Google, Samsung, Starbucks, and many other companies. Google, Microsoft, and Samsung, they actually spend millions of dollars a year trying to make progressive web applications better and more accessible for everyone. So shout out to them. Thank you so much. So there's this website called PWAstats.com. Let's check it out. So if you're ever curious about who uses PWAs, because you might be thinking, oh, it's just me, maybe I'm by myself. You're actually not by yourself. There's a gazillion of companies who use PWAs and you don't even know about. For example, Lyft, Butcher of Blue, let's see who else. Like I said, Starbucks. Let's go over here. And I mean, I could keep scrolling. Pinterest. And in this website right here, you can see their case studies. You can see how PWAs made their company more successful. So super interesting. Definitely check it out, pwastats.com. So Yep, that's what happens whenever you swipe right. And thanks to Tinder and PWAs, Brianna happened to find her ex-boyfriend using the same picture. So awesome for PWAs and Tinder. So what are some of the powers of PWAs? Who in the audience has used a PWA before? Can you tell me one superpower of a PWA? There you go. That's awesome. That's a great superpower. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Raise your hand. Nobody? That's fine. I'm going to tell you all the superpowers that I like about PWAs. So first of all, like I was telling you, you have the capacity to install them in any device. They're SEO friendly, meaning at the end of the day, it's a superpower, right? Because if you have a native application, you don't have the ability to use SEO because Android and iOS don't work like that. And a P2A at the end of the day is a website. They're push notifications friendly, right? And this is doable to service workers, and we're going to be talking about service workers in a second as well. They are extremely performant, right? That's why they increase the user experience, because one of the main purpose of PWAs is to make them accessible and performant. They provide greater user experience. They allow users to use their application offline. They process payments, and they're multi-platform, meaning it doesn't matter if you're working with an Android device, iOS, Windows, web for all. So of course, not everything is awesome with PWAs, sadly, because I'm a huge fan of them, and there's a disadvantage with PWAs as well that you need to be aware of. If you're comparing PWAs with a native application, they don't have the same power as a native application, meaning that you don't have access to everything that a native application has when it comes to the operating system. So keep that in mind. There's a project called Project Fugu, which is a project by Google that is trying to help the web have most of the abilities that a native application has. So definitely check out Project Fugu. Very interesting. There's not a review standard, meaning, so whenever you develop a native application and in Android or iOS, you have to submit the application into the Play Store or Apple Store and wherever. And then this random guy somewhere in the US or wherever decides if your application is cool enough to make it into the store. Has anyone encountered that before? It sucks, right? I mean, sometimes the process can take 2 to 3 days or weeks, and then they just tell you, hey, your application is not cool enough, we don't like it, and you don't even know why. Well, with progressive web applications, you don't have to worry about that, because at the end of the day, a progressive web app is just a website. And then another disadvantage is that Apple needs to catch up with tech. I'm just going to give you a quick example. So push notifications in Safari do not work in iPhones. They do work on Macs, but they don't work on iPhones. And you may be thinking, well, the easy solution is going to be to download Google Chrome, right? But that is not going to work. Why? Because every single browser in your iPhone is actually a wrapper for Safari. So in the background, it's actually using Safari. So push notifications are not going to work in your iPhone, unless you have a native applications. Native applications, they do work. So why I fell in love with PWAs? This is actually a true story. PWAs were my first love, and they're going to be my last. Actually, I'm going to lie. My first love was jQuery. Anyone has worked with jQuery before? Did you like it? Did you love it? I'm pretty sure everyone did. Like, jQuery is amazing. So this is what happened. Back in the days, I was doing consulting, and one of my clients had this application that they needed to live in many countries as possible. At that moment, they were in 90 countries, which was great. The problem that they were having was the majority of those countries, they had poor internet connection. If they have poor internet connection, that means that they weren't making that many sales, and the user experience was decreasing. So we had to come up with a solution. And the solution was progressive web applications, right? So thanks to the service workers and the background sync API, we were able to reach 120 countries and way more. What else did we accomplish? So we reached 120 countries. We reduced the server calls by 32%, right? Thanks to caching strategies using service workers. 1 out of 5 Americans have a product from the company that I developed the application. Obviously, I wasn't the only developer. There was a huge team, and it was everyone's effort. Now the PWA load time is around 3 seconds. And now 63% of the households in Beijing, China, own at least one product of the client that I was working for. So all this translates to money. Cool story, bro, right? Did I change your life? Did I touch your heart? Well, hopefully I did. So PWAs touch my heart all the time. So what are the main components of a PWA? Anyone has an idea? What do you need to have a PWA? If you don't know, it's fine because we're going to talk about them right now. But if you have worked with P2As, you may know. So nobody does. That's fine. So the manifest.json, the service worker, and obviously the web application. And this is a super cool store that I built. The manifest.json is just a JSON file that has the description on how your progressive web application is going to look like in your device that you're installing the application, right? So, for example, you have the icons, right? And the icons are going to be in different sizes depending on the size of your device. For example, for an iPad and an iPhone, they're going to use a different icon. The start URL means where is the application going to be starting from. So let's pretend that you have a progressive web application working on your device, and you go to, I don't know, to a different page that is not a home page, right? You close the application, you're going to open up the progressive web application again, and you're going to be starting again from the home page. So that's what the start URL property does. The display standalone is just the orientation of your progressive web application. Standalone is the standardized one most of the people use because of accessibility. Some people, if you use a different property or a different value, people might have a hard time reading your progressive web application, so keep that in mind. The background color is the splash screen. So whenever you open up the progressive web application, it's going to have certain color, and of course you can add some cool stuff in your splash screen just to make it feel and look like a native app, right? And the theme color is just the color of the navigation bar. So let's talk about service workers. Anyone knows what a service worker is? My friend with the gray sweater. What's up? What do you think a service worker is? Yeah, you. Want to raise your hand? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say what a service worker is. A service worker is a script that is running separately from our website in the background. So it's not the same as your index.js file or any other kind of JavaScript file. Why? Because those files, they actually live in your web application. The service worker lives in your browser. And I'm going to show you where. So essentially, we have the web app, right? We have the service worker, and then we have the cache and the network. And as you can see, the service worker is in the middle, intercepting anything that comes from the cache and the network. So the service worker is going to be driving, or application is going to be making the decisions for us. So what can a service worker do? We can cache network requests. We can handle how the network requests are done on your website. We can make the use of the background sync API. Right, we can cache things on our website like assets, CSS files, JavaScript files, API calls, while we can receive push notifications thanks to the service workers, and we can use our app offline thanks to the caching strategies and the service workers. Now, working with service workers. So the service worker, right? The first thing that I recommend people to do is to check if the service worker is available in the navigator. That's like good practice. And then once your website has been loaded, then you're gonna register the service worker. Service workers have to always live in the root of your application. You can only have one service worker, but there might be a few scenarios that you need to have 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. How do you do that? Well, easy. What you have to do is put them wherever you want to have your service workers, and then combine them into one single service worker. And that single service worker is going to live where? In the root of your file, of your folder. So now, one of the life cycles of the service worker is to actually install the service worker. And this is one of the most important life cycles because besides installing the service worker, you're opening the cache, right? And you're telling the cache what are the files that you are wanting to cache, right? For example, could be your index HTML, could be all the images on your homepage, and so on. I'm gonna drink a little bit of water because I'm very thirsty. What else? So, intercepting server calls. This is doable thanks to the fetch method, right? So essentially, what you're seeing right here, I'm gonna explain the code. You have the caches, and caches is actually a reserved keyword from your browser, right? As you can see, it's not declared anywhere. Why? Because it's already something that is declared for me. So what I'm doing is I'm intercepting the server call, and a server call could be anything. Could be every time that you open a website, you need to get the images, right? You need to get the data, and every single thing that is displayed on your website has to come from the server. So every server call is something that we can intercept with the service workers. And what we do is we try to match it, we try to find it in the caches, and then we store the result in the resource variable that we have right here. If we have something in the resource, then return that. Meaning, if I have found something in my cache, then I'm gonna use the value for my cache instead of the actual network call. What does that mean? That my application is gonna be more performant because instead of making the actual call, it's just going to the cache and getting stuff way quicker. If that is not true, then I'm actually making the server call. So far, so good? Awesome. Now, the activate service worker is another lifecycle method from the service workers, and it's very common for people to use this method to get rid of all caches. At the end of the day, your browser has a memory capacity, right? So you don't want to be caching everything all the time and have multiple caches that you don't even use anymore. So you can use this life cycle to get rid of previous caches that you don't use. So let's walk through this code really quick. So essentially, I'm using the promise.all. Promise.all essentially runs promises and gives me one back. And inside of this premise.all, as you can see, I'm iterating through the key list, which the key list is going to be the list of all my caches, right? It's just going to be a regular object. Then I'm comparing the key and checking if it's different than my actual cache that I saved in my application. If it's different, for example, if you have version 1.0 and version 2.0, it's going to remove the version 1.0 because I'm in a newer version. And what is that doing? Cleaning memory, so you're going to have more space in your browser. And the self.clients, that claim, essentially what it does, it tells the service worker, hey, I'm giving you the full power for you to control my application before any other JavaScript files takes over my app. So essentially, the Activate Service Worker, right, works like this. You have the service worker, then you install it, and then goes to the event, which is going to be the activate, right? And then as you can see, goes to the cache, does the logic, comparing the cache names, and then deletes the one that you're not going to be using. Now let's talk about caching strategies with service workers. Like I was telling you, caching strategies are amazing because they give you the ability to manipulate the server calls and make your application way more performant. So here's one of them. I'm just going to talk about, like, there's multiple of them. I'm just going to talk about like the most popular ones, which is cache failing back to network. So as you can see, I have my web application right here, and then I'm intercepting the network calls with my service worker, right? So I go to a network, and because my caching failed, meaning, for example, if you're trying to cache an image and that image doesn't exist in your cache, what does that mean? That you need to get it from somewhere. And where are you going to get it from? If you don't have it in your cache, you're going to get it from your network. And then you're going to return it into your application. So here's another one. Network failing back to cache. So it's very similar to the other one. Don't get confused. Different images. I know they look almost the same, but they're actually different. So essentially what happens is you're trying to make a server call, right? And if for whatever reason it doesn't work, maybe you're offline, then what your application is going to do, thanks to the service workers, is going to reach out to the cache and it's going to tell the cache, hey, give me all the assets, give me the images or whatever I need to display into the application. Here's another one that is called cache then network. So as you can see, I have my web app again, right? I'm going to go to the cache. I'm going to return it, that value, but I'm still going to make the server call. This is very useful whenever people have like slow internet connection, right? You can use the cache and then later on update the things displayed on the page with the newest things coming from the server. So now let's actually see a real demo. So this is the code that I've been explaining. This is just small, tiny, progressive web application, super complex. As you can see, I only have like a few things in there. I was joking about complex. It's actually very simple. I have my CSS, I have the index.js, and the index.js is the one that is going to tell the service worker to be registered. The index.js is a regular JS file. Remember, the one that is not the same is the service worker. You put it in the root of your file, like I was telling you, but it's not going to live in your application. It's going to live in the browser, like I was telling you. So as you can see, I have the name of my cache, which is version 1.0, and I'm telling my application, these are all the files that I want to cache beforehand. And then I'm going to go to the install lifecycle method, and I'm going to use the array of files that I want to cache. So I'm using this array, using it right here. I open the cache with the name that I'm providing right here. And then I'm adding all those files into my cache. Awesome. So now let's go to the actual app. So this is my beautiful application, like I was telling you. I love Nikes. And if you want to buy me a pair, please do, because these ones are broken since yesterday. So I don't know what happened in the plane, but I woke up and one of them was broken. So let's see. So this is the application. As you can see, if I go to the network tab, it says offline. So this application is working without internet connection, right? And if you take a look to the network tab, right, it says right here, service worker. Why? Because these assets are actually being handled by the service worker, and the service worker puts them in the cache, and the application is grabbing all the assets from the cache instead of from a network call. If you click on application, this is one of the most important tabs. As you can see, I have the name of my cache right here, and I can see everything that I decided to cache. Very cool. And right here in the manifest.json, you can click on it and see all the values that you passed into your manifest.json file. These are the actual icons that I have for my PWA, and the theme color, the start URL, the background color as well. Service worker, right? It shows an error right here, but it's actually not an actual error. So I was like playing with the application, and it registers the number of times that your application has broken the service worker. So this doesn't mean that it's actually broken. It just means that it could have been broken in the past. If this right here is not green, that means that your actual service worker is not running and it's not working, right? And as you can see, it says activated and is running, which means that everything is good to go. And right here, if you click on see all the registrations, these are all the service workers that I have living in my browser. Like I was telling you, a service worker doesn't live in your application, it lives in the browser. So this is where you can see all of them. What else? What else? Oh yes, very important. If you see this icon right here, all the way in the top, hopefully you can see it, that means that your progressive web application is ready to be installed. So if I click in here, I'm gonna have this little pop-up. Then I'm gonna have the name of my application, which in this case is my PWAs, and then I'm gonna click install. And there you go. This is an actual app living in your computer or any device. As you can see, I have Twitter as well. If you didn't know, Twitter is a progressive web application as well. I use it all the time. Instagram is a progressive web application as well. The desktop version, just FYI. And if we go over here, something really cool is I'm gonna show you how the activate method is actually working. So let's put it into test. So I'm gonna remove this for a second. I'm gonna uninstall it. Okay, so here's my beautiful app. Then I go to the network tab, no throttling, which means I actually am back online. I'm gonna click on application. As we see, we go to cache. It says version 1.0. Now let's change the name. So I'm gonna change it to 2.0, and I'm going to remove this image from the cache. I'm gonna save it. Then I'm gonna go over here, refresh, and it says 2.0. And as you can see, I don't have the version 1.0 anymore. Why? Because it got removed from my cache. Did anyone get that? Awesome. So thank you everyone for coming today. If you think my presentation was terrible, give me some clap. So everyone clapped. So I think my presentation was terrible then. So anyone has questions, raise your hand.
We have one question online. Pato, what do you think of Microsoft's Blazor approach for PWAs?
I haven't used Blazor, so I don't know the answer. But reach out to me on Twitter like in 2 days, and then I'm gonna ask my friends from Microsoft if they can tell me anything about it, and then I can give you the answer.
Okay, Danny, so I hope you heard that. Any questions here? Great. Let me just run with the microphone. May I see the hand again? Ah.
Hello. Are there any workarounds for the iPhone push notifications? Because from my perspective, it's kind of a major drawback of PWAs nowadays.
It is. It is a huge problem. And I work for OneSignal. OneSignal is the biggest push notification provider right now in the world. And guess what? We don't have a solution for that. It just sucks. yeah, I hate to say that, but it's a problem. People work very, very hard to make the web more accessible for everyone, and I mean sometimes it just doesn't work for everyone, right? The way we want to, but yeah, sorry. Anyone else?
I guess everybody really wants to get to that bar and have a chat
Yeah,
with
everyone
you
wants to
over a pint.
have a drink.
So thank you again, Pato. One more time, a round of applause for a great presentation.